There's a detail in the record from 1174 that most people skim right past. A tutor presses a burning candle to a 9-year-old boy's arm, and the boy doesn't flinch, doesn't cry out, doesn't even look down. The tutor's the one who goes pale, not the kid. I keep coming back to that moment, because everyone else in this story gets remembered for what they did. Baldwin gets remembered for what his body was already doing to him before he ever picked up a weapon. He was born into the royal house of Jerusalem, which sounds glamorous until you actually look at a map of that kingdom in the 1170s. It's a sliver, a narrow strip of coastline and desert wedged between two much bigger, much hungrier neighbors, Egypt to the south, Syria to the east. And by the time Baldwin's a teenager, those two are no longer separate problems. One man has stitched them together, Saladin. And when a kingdom that thin suddenly finds a unified empire on both its flanks, that's not a border dispute anymore. That's an expiration date. So, that's the backdrop. Now put a sick child on the throne of it. Baldwin's father dies when the boy is 13. Not in battle, nothing dramatic dysentery. On campaign, the way half of medieval history actually ends, quietly and badly. And the crown just lands on this kid. A kid who's already been diagnosed. The physicians don't even really need to say the word out loud by that point. Leprosy, in the 12th century, isn't a diagnosis you recover from. It's a sentence with a very slow execution date. Most people who got it were pushed outside the city walls, given a bell to ring so others could hear them coming and step away in time. Baldwin didn't get that mercy of being forgotten. He got a throne instead. And I think that's the part that unsettles me the most, if I'm honest. Not the disease itself, awful as it was, but the fact that an entire kingdom full of grown men with armies and titles and ambitions looked at a numb, armed teenager and decided, well, he'll have to do. There wasn't a better option. The barons circled anyway. Some of them knelt and meant it. Most of them were already doing math in their heads about what happens when the boy king finally can't hold the crown anymore. Because here's the thing. Nobody tells you about that period of Baldwin's life. The disease wasn't the only threat closing in on him. It was the court. It was always the court. Anyway, fast forward 3 years. He's 16 now. And this is the part people actually know. If they know anything about him at all, Saladin crosses the border with something like 26,000 men. Not a raid. Not a probe. A full invasion aimed straight at Jerusalem. And Baldwin has, what, a few hundred knights. Some infantry. The numbers aren't close. They're not even in the same conversation. His advisors tell him to do the sensible thing. Fall back. Hide behind the walls. Wait for help that might not come in time, but wait anyway. Because what's the alternative? He says no. And I want to sit on that for a second, because it's easy to fly past it in the retelling. 16-year-old refuses caution, rides out anyway. Very dramatic. Moving on. But think about what that decision actually required. His arm is already going numb. He can't grip a sword properly. Someone has to strap his shield onto him because his fingers won't do it themselves. He is, by any physical measure, one of the least capable people on that battlefield. And he chooses to be on it anyway, at the front of it, instead of somewhere safe. They catch Saladin's army near a low hill called Montgisard, spread out, foraging, not expecting a fight, because why would they? Nobody expects the sick kid to attack. That's the whole miscalculation, really. Saladin looked at Baldwin and saw a body that was already losing. He didn't account for what was still working inside it. The charge hits. And it's fast. Faster than anyone predicted. Faster than the numbers should have allowed. Saladin's line doesn't hold. It doesn't even really bend first. It just comes apart. Thousands of men break and run. Saladin himself doesn't ride out of there like a conquering sultan. He gets out on the back of a racing camel, which if you think about it for a second is almost funny, and almost tragic at the same time. The most powerful man in the Islamic world, fleeing a battlefield on the fastest animal available, because his own horse wasn't quick enough. Jerusalem goes wild when the news comes back. Bells ringing, people in the streets. A leper boy just humiliated the man half of Europe was already afraid of. If you've stuck with the video this far, by the way, this is usually where I'd ask you to hit subscribe, and I'm going to. But not because the algorithm wants me to. It's because this story doesn't end at Montgisard. And I think most people stop the story right there, at the victory, like that's the whole point. It isn't. Stick around. Because what happens after is, honestly, the part that stays with me. Because here's what the celebration in Jerusalem couldn't see yet. The disease didn't pause for the win. It kept going. 2 years later, Baldwin's right hand is basically dead weight. He presses it flat against the arm of his throne sometimes. Apparently, just to check. Just to see if anything's still there. Nothing is. His skin is cracking open in sores that don't heal the way they're supposed to. He starts wearing a silver mask, not out of vanity, but because he'd rather the court stare at cold metal than at what leprosy had actually done to his face. And this is where the story stops being about a battle and starts being about something quieter. And honestly, worse. Because while his body is failing month over month, the people around him are doing exactly what you'd expect people to do around a dying king who still, technically, has power. They circle. His sister's husband, a French knight with a lot more ambition than sense, starts positioning himself for the succession. Factions form. Some barons back Baldwin. Some back the brother-in-law. Most of them, if we're being honest about human nature, are just backing whoever they think is going to win, so they'll be owed something afterward. Baldwin can see all of it happening. That's what gets me. He's not oblivious to the vultures. He just can't stop them the way a healthy king could. He can't ride out and settle it with force. He has to fight this battle differently. From a throne he sometimes has to be carried onto, and somehow, he still wins that one too for a while. He strips his brother-in-law of authority after the man nearly restarts the war with Saladin over a broken truce, some reckless raid on a merchant caravan, the kind of stupid decision that gets people killed for no reason. Baldwin humiliates him publicly for it. Can't walk by this point, can barely see, still runs the room. There's a moment a few years later that I think about more than the battle itself, actually. Saladin invades again, lays siege to a fortress near the Sea of Galilee. Baldwin's regent is too cautious, won't move the army, and the fortress is dying on the walls while he hesitates. And Baldwin, blind now, can't walk, hasn't held a weapon in ages, orders his servants to carry him to the front lines on a litter. Just think about that image for a second, not riding in like a hero, carried on a stretcher to a battlefield he can't even see. And Saladin, when he hears whose banners are approaching, withdraws, doesn't fight. A blind, dying king on a stretcher makes the most feared warlord in the region turn around and walk away without a single sword being drawn. That's not really a war story anymore, is it? That's something closer to dread, if you're on the other side of it. Saladin had beaten armies. He hadn't figured out how to beat whatever it was that kept this particular king from lying down. Baldwin doesn't get to see that moment. Not literally. His eyes are already gone by then. He rules the last stretch of his life from a bed, in the dark, dictating letters he'll never read himself, forcing barons to swear loyalty to a child, heir he's chosen specifically to keep the ambitious brother-in-law off the throne. He knows some of those barons are lying to his face while they say the words. He can't see their expressions anymore, doesn't need to. He'd learned who was loyal a long time before he lost his sight. He dies at 24. I have to sit with that number every time I come back to this story because it never stops feeling wrong. 11 years on the throne. 11 years of a body actively dissolving while he held together a kingdom that, by every reasonable measure, should have fallen apart around him years earlier. And 2 years after he's gone, just 2, the brother-in-law, he spent his whole reign trying to sideline loses Jerusalem to Saladin anyway. At Hattin, in a defeat so total, it basically ends the Crusader presence in the Holy Land as anyone had known it. So what did any of it actually buy? That's the question I can't fully put down. Montgisard, the stretcher, the 11 years of refusing to just lie down and let the disease finish the job early. What was it for? If the ending was always going to be the ending, maybe it bought time. Maybe that's the honest answer, and not some easy poetic one. Just years. Plain years, that a dying kingdom got to keep existing, because one sick kid decided the walls weren't the answer. Time isn't nothing, but it isn't a fix either, and I think Baldwin probably knew that better than anyone in that court. He wasn't fighting for a permanent outcome. There wasn't one available to him. He was fighting because the alternative was doing nothing while his body and his kingdom failed on the same schedule, and he apparently couldn't live with that, even though living wasn't really an option for him in any long-term sense anyway. I don't know. I've read through the accounts of Montgisard more times than I probably should, and the thing that gets me isn't the battle. It's that a body that couldn't feel a burning candle at 9 years old somehow still felt enough about a city, about people who weren't even always loyal to him, to keep getting carried back onto battlefields, until there was nothing left to carry. If this one got under your skin the way it got under mine, let me know down in the comments. I'm curious whether people land on the same part I do or somewhere else in it entirely. And if you want more of these dug-up, slightly uncomfortable corners of history, there's a subscribe button right there, and I'd genuinely appreciate it. I'll see you in the next one.